This tutorial is on how to loom knit a seed stitch scarf. I made a child-sized scarf on a 41 peg loom, and this scarf is pretty thick for a Canadian winter, but do feel free to use a smaller gauge loom with lighter yarn if you would like a scarf that is thinner. Thank you for watching my channel, Ms. Yarn. I hope this video helps you understand the seed stitch so you can use it for a variety of projects. Today we're going to cover number 1, how to mark your loom. Number 2, how to cast on using an E-wrap cast on. Number 3, how to do the seed stitch. We'll be using the U-knit stitch and the purl stitch. And finally, number 4, how to bind off. For this step, we'll do a slightly more advanced bind off since we will bind off in pattern. For the supplies, you're going to need a knitting loom with a gauge of 13/16 of an inch. You'll need 1 ball of number 6 weight yarn. I used Wool Ease Thick and Quick and only needed 1 ball since this scarf is for a child. And as mentioned earlier, feel free to use a different loom with different yarn for your own needs. Your supplies will also include a hook, a pair of scissors, a yarn needle, and something to mark your loom. Let's start the project by marking our loom. To the left of the anchor peg, I marked pegs 1 and 2. Then I counted the pegs around the loom so I could mark pegs 10 and 11. This will help me show you how to create edges of the scarf that are smooth rather than bumpy. Let me show you a close-up shot of how I marked pegs 1 and 2 and how I marked pegs 10 and 11. You'll also notice that I marked all the even pegs with a purple elastic. That will definitely come in handy when I do the seed stitch. Now we're ready to cast on, so let's put a slip knot on the anchor peg. So for the E-wrap cast on, we'll wrap each peg back to front. So let's wrap peg 1 back to front. Now we wrap peg 2 back to front, and we will continue wrapping. As you can see, the wraps are going counterclockwise around the pegs. Now I'm at the left side of my project, and I'm wrapping peg 10 and peg 11 as usual. And now it's time to go back to the right. I will not rewrap peg 11. Instead, I will wrap peg 10 back to front and continue to the right. You might notice that I'm pushing down the loops with my left thumb as I move along. And you'll also notice that these wraps are going clockwise around the pegs. Now I'm at the right side of my project, so I'm doing my E-wrap on peg 1. And now I need to knit over all of the bottom loops. Knit over on peg 1, knit over on peg 2, and so on. Now I'm knitting over on peg 10, and now our cast on is done. Before I demonstrate the seed stitch, I want to emphasize 2 things. Firstly, to create a smooth braided edge, we will never purl on the end pegs. We will either skip peg 1 or skip peg 11, as shown by the letter S, or we will do a U-knit stitch on peg 1 or peg 11, as indicated by the letter K. Secondly, for the body of the scarf, a knit stitch will always sit on top of a purl stitch, and a purl stitch will always sit on top of a knit stitch. That's what creates the seed stitch pattern. For example, on peg 2, we will purl on it during row 1, but we will knit on it during row 2. Okay, let's get started. For row 1, we will skip peg 1, that's a slip stitch, and we will purl on peg 2. Peg 2 is an even numbered peg that is marked with an elastic. Lay your working yarn below the loop. Dive into the loop with your hook, grab the working yarn and pull it upwards to make a new loop. Remove everything off of the peg and put the new loop back on the peg. Then tighten it up. Do a unit stitch on peg 3 by wrapping it front to back and knitting over. Then purl on peg 4 where you see the elastic. Let's keep doing this knit 1 purl 1 sequence until we complete peg 11. And let's also take note that we're always using the unit version of the knit stitch for this particular project. If you want to use the E-wrap or a true knit stitch, that's totally fine. Just make a little swatch and see if you like that. Here I'm purling on peg 10 and knitting on peg 11. And now row 1 is done. So now let's do row 2 of this 2-row repeat. We will skip peg 11 since we don't want a bumpy edge. And we'll knit on peg 10 and purl on peg 9. Continue this knit 1 purl 1 sequence until you complete peg 2. Where you see an elastic, you will knit those pegs. Do not purl them. Here I am knitting on peg 2, and because peg 1 is at the edge, I'm going to knit that peg as well. And now we have completed row 2. Now that you know the 2-row repeat, remove the slip knot and continue on your own until you reach the length that you're looking for. I used the whole ball of yarn, and my scarf ended up being 38 inches or 97 centimeters long. Let's meet again when it's time to bind off. So I have used up practically all the yarn, and now I want to bind off in pattern. Instead of using all knit stitches like the basic bind off, we will use some purl stitches to bind off, as if we were following row 1. So where we see elastics, we are going to purl rather than knit. So purl on peg 2, move the loop from peg 2 to peg 1, knit over on peg 1, and move the loop from peg 1 to peg 2. Now we'll knit on peg 3, we'll move the loop from peg 3 to peg 2, we'll knit over on peg 2, then we'll move the loop from peg 2 to peg 3. Excellent! Now purl on peg 4, that's where we see the elastic. Move the loop from peg 4 over to peg 3, then knit over on peg 3, then move that loop from peg 3 to peg 4. Very good. Now let's knit on peg 5. Move 5 to 4. Knit over on peg 4. Move 4 to 5. Now let's purl on peg 6. Move 6 to 5. Knit over on peg 5. Now move 5 to 6. It looks like you've got the hang of it by now, so keep binding off in pattern on your own until you're at peg 11. I have jumped ahead and now I'm knitting on peg 11. Let's move 11 to 10. Now we'll knit over on peg 10. Then we'll take our scissors and cut our working yarn. Let's leave a tail of at least 8 inches. Now with our hook, let's pull out the loop on peg 10 so it's completely off the loom. And now our bind off is done. Now it's time to weave in the ends. I'm not an expert at this, but I'll just try my best. I have added my thread to my needle and I'm working on the wrong side of the scarf. Here I am just attempting to follow some stitches. Go ahead and hide the tail on your own, and then we'll go to the cast-on edge. The cast-on doesn't really need to be tightened, but I'm going to tighten mine in order to make it look a little bit neater. I'll just pull on these bottom loops, working from the left side towards the right. Now let's thread our needle and weave in this last end. I hope this video tutorial on this seed stitch scarf is helpful for you. Thank you so much for watching my channel. I'll see you in the next video.